Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and I suppose I should put the clown nose on today after trying to get out a white pill video as quickly as possible, because I like to do that every now and then. Unfortunately, that has been rather overshadowed by the log-sized black pill I'm going to have to go through today. There's no point beating around the bush here, let's just get into it. Keir Starmer has officially now handed over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. It's over, there's no getting it back. We've ceded sovereignty. It's going to cost way much more than it is actually worth to try and get these islands back from a nation that is not willing to give them back, even though the island nations we gave them to were 3,000 miles away, something stupid. The cost is also more than we thought. The numbers being thrown about were 90 million a year. It's now gone up to over 100 million a year. And believe it or not, that's not going to be the end of the propaganda numbers. So despite basically everybody telling Labour that this is one of the stupidest things that they could do, and is not exactly going to make people think that sovereignty of our own lands is at the highest of their priority, and the protection of those lands, is the highest of their priority. They've gone ahead and proven not only will they give them away, they will pay to give them away too, simply because the UN says, oh, maybe you should, go on. Not even a binding agreement, by the way, just, yeah, we advise you do this. Why? Because a Russian judge and a Chinese judge said so. Great. Anyway, we may as well go straight to the actual details of the agreement. The first page of the agreement seems like it's written by some terrible humanities student, as they are recognising the long and shared history between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Mauritius, as we actually used to have sovereignty over Mauritius. There is a desiring to build a close and enduring bilateral partnership based on mutual respect and trust that enhances the prosperity and well-being of our people, rule of law, and the security of our nations in the wider Indian Ocean region. We literally had that before the ICJ made their stupid decision that we took seriously. I think we'd actually be more respected as a nation if we just said, oh, that's a stupid decision, we're ignoring it. I don't know why as well this page has italics for the first words of each paragraph, but this is what I mean. It's like it's designed by a terrible humanities student. Having regard to the decision of international courts and tribunals, no, don't do that. Don't do that at all. Apparently that means we shouldn't have any land whatsoever. Recognising the wrongs of the past, you're going to have to go into details for that, because granted, you know, the UK had to remove Chagosians from the Chagos Islands, but I don't see really what that has to do with Mauritius. Recalling the unique circumstances and history of the Chagos archipelago and mindful of the need to complete the process of decolonisation of Mauritius. Excuse me? How have we been colonising them for the past 50 years or so? What? Just to make this absolutely clear, we now have officially in writing, with an agreement the United Kingdom has signed, our Prime Minister has signed, it has the phrase, we need to complete the process of decolonisation. I don't really care what country that is referring to, but to have it Mauritius of all of them is absolutely absurd. We granted them independence back in the 40s or 50s or something. They've been independent for 70, 80 years. If you ever see the word decolonisation written unironically, think of it as diversity or equality or something like that. It just means effectively punish the British or maybe the white Americans or whatever. That's all it means. And to legitimise that phrase in an international agreement like this is just crazy. Nothing short of it. For this paragraph alone, agreeing to this paragraph alone, there is nothing more important in the United Kingdom right now than getting rid of the traitors of Labour out of Parliament. That is all that matters now. This is possibly the worst decision a Prime Minister can make, and I'm not even joking. We're barely even through this document. Conscious that past treatment of the Chagosians have left a deeply regrettable legacy and committed to supporting the welfare of all Chagosians, I don't actually have much of a problem with that. They were mistreated and it is still in living memory. Hell, the white pill video from yesterday was all set off by a Chagosian who used to live there, and Britain forcibly removed from the island so they could put the military base there. Now, there's an argument that obviously moving them to Britain and giving them British citizenship and all the privileges that come with that is already compensation enough. However, there are some Chagosians who were moved over to Mauritius and very badly treated by the government. However, I have the feeling that that is not the type of Chagossian that this agreement is going on about, given the word decolonisation actually exists in this document. Desiring to promote the protection and conservation of the environment of the Chagos archipelago, fine. Emphasising the importance of protecting international peace and security, including by ensuring the long-term secure and effective operation of the base on Diego Garcia, which you could do if you didn't give them away and pay for that privilege. So what's that about? Committed to a full and final resolution of the differences that have arisen between them in relation to the Chagos archipelago. Right. Horrific first page. It only gets worse, by the way. Let's go into some more detail. Honestly, most of the details are pretty boring and what you'd expect anyway. Mauritius now obviously will have sovereignty over the entire archipelago, bar Diego Garcia, which we are obviously paying 100 million odd to lease off them for a huge amount of sovereignty. Not full sovereignty, as we'll get to. And largely Mauritius sovereignty and British sovereignty over Diego Garcia, where the military bases are completely separate, but they will cooperate on stopping the trafficking of narcotics, arms and, well, slaves. It's up to the Mauritius government to implement a programme of resettlement to the islands for the Chagos natives, and that's a totally Mauritius project, and this is a big problem that British Chagossians had. They don't trust the Mauritius government to resettle them onto the islands because of the poor treatments that Chagossians that were forced over to Mauritius suffered after, obviously, they were forced off the island by the British. Honestly, pretty much coin flip for Chagossians there. If you ended up on Mauritius, you had a bad coin toss. If you ended up in Britain, it was a pretty good one. Which, yeah, would be another point in the court of don't do this deal, and yet Starmer did it anyway. Another interesting part is the economic arrangements. So, in consideration of this agreement, the UK agrees to pay Mauritius an annual sum, that's the 100 million, to capitalise a trust fund for benefit of Chagossians as established by Mauritius. So we're not just paying to rent Diego Garcia, we are also paying into a trust fund that is effectively supposed to go straight to Chagossian natives. Again, this is quite a level of trust that I just do not have for Mauritius. I think that is somehow not going to end up with the Chagossians or to pay for infrastructure on the Chagos Islands. And finally, we are granting a multi-year funding as part of a development framework for projects to be undertaken by Mauritius across 25 years. So, for a quarter of the time we're renting Diego Garcia, we are also effectively throwing more foreign aid money at Mauritius. So at this point I'd like to point out that the GDP of Mauritius is about $14.5 billion. You can actually translate that into around £10 billion. What's actually happening here is that every year, for 100 years, we are giving 1% of Mauritius's GDP to Mauritius to rent an island of them that a week ago we literally had sovereignty over. And that's just for the rent. We are then also giving them direct money that is supposedly supposed to be going to the Chagossians. If that actually does happen, fair enough. Probably not too much of an issue with that, compared to the other things, I mean. But then we're also giving them foreign aid for infrastructure projects, which adds on to this 1% of their GDP we're giving them. We've been rinsed. We've been completely and utterly rinsed. This is why for months all you kept seeing was, oh, we'll just give it to them. Oh no, they want us to give them money to give it to them? Right, okay, here's some money. Oh, they want more? Okay, we'll give them more. Oh, you want even more than that? Okay, we'll give you even more. Until you've ended up in this situation where probably the UN got bored of them of clearly rinsing us. They're like, this is embarrassing now. Don't make it look obvious. We don't want the people to revolt over in Britain. But frankly, as far as I'm concerned, this decision means that anyone who votes Labour either is not paying attention to any of the news, does not care for geopolitics beyond, oh, as long as Europe's largely on the same side, we're all right, or only cares about their public sector paycheck. That's it. I hardly find any of them legitimate reasons to be okay with this deal. And yet this is the world we live in. A fifth of the voters would still vote Labour. It's crazy. Not to mention the fact that an awful lot of benefits cuts are being made at the moment at the expense of British people, while we're literally giving 100 million over to Mauritius now. Absolutely insane politics. I actually can't believe this has happened. I'm kind of lost for words. All I can keep saying over and over is this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life from any Prime Minister. Say what you will about Liz Truss, but she never made a decision this bad. Anyway, the payment details are elsewhere, and this agreement constitutes a full and final settlement of all claims by Mauritius in relation to the Chagos archipelago. In other words, we're basically paying them to shut up about colonisation of the past. And these were lands that were never Mauritius's, by the way. I hate leaving the parts where I'm lost for words in, but there's no other way I can get across how stupid this is. I'm at a loss for words. Your tax money, my tax money, it's going to people who are basically robbing us. I've got to move on. I have to, otherwise I won't say anything. Anyway, as mentioned, most of the rest of this agreement is stuff you'd rather expect that I've already pretty much summarised, but another absolutely crazy part of this is this particular paragraph when it comes to defence. After explaining all the rights that Britain has to its own defence and military rights in the area, if they are going to be using lethal force on a third country, well, this happens. As to paragraph 1bi that declares Britain's unrestricted ability to use lethal force, the United Kingdom agrees to expeditiously inform Mauritius of any armed attack on a third state directly emanating from the base of Diego Garcia. In other words, in this agreement, it's beyond me why this is even in the agreement, but Britain, as part of this agreement, has to tell Mauritius, if we're, say, in a war with Russia, that if we are allowing the Americans to send stealth bombers or we're sending troops or whatever from the base, we have to let Mauritius know. We have to let Mauritius know. They're 3,000 miles away, but we have to let Mauritius know. Which, of course, given that they are a Chinese vassal, it's effectively like giving your military intelligence straight to your enemies. Because that is how little I trust Mauritius here. It's crazy that this is in here. Again, I'm kind of lost for words beyond that. I don't know what else to say. This is one of the stupidest agreements I've ever seen in my life. And we've not got into the details of all of how much this is going to cost. Because first, we may as well look at Keir Starmer's press conference on this, because it was horrendous.
Good afternoon. A few moments ago, I signed a deal to secure the joint UK-US base on Diego Garcia.
Oh, this viperous framing already. I have secured our national interests, I'll have you know. No, you haven't, and I think you know you haven't. We already had secured that base. We had it secured for 70, 80 years. What are you talking about? You've not secured anything. You've paid to put us in a worse position. We now have to let the vassals of our enemies know when we're doing any sort of military deployment with lethal force involved. How is that in any way securing our national interests? Honestly, get out of here. I want to stop this already, but it's important I go through this because he tells an awful lot of porkies in this.
This is absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, and therefore for the safety and security of the British people.
I know of literally nobody who buys this, by the way. The only people I've seen defending this are other Labour MPs who are looking to get ministerial positions, people like Mike Tapp. There are plenty of Labour sources, as they call them, saying, effectively, all the MPs just have no way of defending this whatsoever. They're fed up of effectively having to be lawyers saying, oh, well, you know, it was settled on by the International Court of Justice. Because they know absolutely nobody buys that, and they know the UN is a joke. And they know that this is the Prime Minister once again showing he favours international law over British sovereignty, which is just absolutely absurd. Vote reform. That's all you can do. Remember, the Tories even went into this deal in the first place. The only reason this deal was able to be thrown into Britain's own net by Labour was because the Tories had set it up for them.
The full assessment of why this is so important is highly classified, but I want to speak as frankly as I can.
Well, isn't that just convenient? You can't tell us exactly why this was so important to the point where you have to give away 100 million a year to Mauritius, but you will still try and defend it. There's nobody buying this. I've not seen a single journalist try and defend this other than Dan Hodges, who is effectively saying, oh, well, even Trump wants it. The reason Trump wants it is because, as far as I can tell from all the news that's come out about this, the Americans are paying less for this deal than they were when we owned the islands. That's why they were in favour of it. And if it all goes pear-shaped and we end up losing the lease on it, the Americans can just step in and pay for it themselves. They're not too bothered about that. Plus, on top of that, Donald Trump was very wooed by the personal letter from the king offering the state a visit. So as far as Trump's concerned, he's had his fair trade on this. Madness in the long term, though, but Trump isn't exactly known for his long-term thinking.
The strategic location of this base is of the utmost significance to Britain.
And it's only going to be available to us for 99 years. Thank you for that. Reminder, Hong Kong, we had the exact same thing with. We wrote a deal to the Chinese saying, yes, we'll lease it for 99 years. And then we lost it, obviously, and we're never getting it back. And, well, obviously then we had a bit of a refugee crisis with Hong Kongers. Chagos Islands have absolutely no inhabitants on them whatsoever, so I suppose there's no risk of the refugee crisis. But ceding sovereignty of the islands to a country that never owned them with no inhabitants on, where the inhabitants or the ex-inhabitants have absolutely no interest of giving it to Mauritius, to the point they tried to get the High Court to stop this stupid act of self-harm. Where's the defence for any of this? Oh, it's highly classified. Oh, so you don't have to explain it. Incredible. I'm not joking here. Keir Starmer literally goes on for about 2 minutes about how important this base is, to finish with this.
The base is one of the most significant contributions that we make to our security relationship with the United States, which is critical for keeping Britain safe.
This base is so important that it can't be under our sovereignty anymore and has to be under a third country's sovereignty instead. Again, from what I can tell, the reason the Americans were on side with this is because effectively it was a cheaper deal for this particular base. I mean, America has bases literally all over the world. It is a very, very strategic island, and America would absolutely want to keep it. But if they're hearing that Britain is willing to shell out more money to save the Americans money, all because of some stupid UN, non-binding, by the way, decision, then why wouldn't they agree to it? And the reason that Labour was so desperate to actually get it through is because they are true believers in international courts. Now, why did the Tories start it? Well, from what I can understand, it was effectively to appease Mauritius to some level, to try and put off the UN looking into this case again and possibly making it binding. Which, I'm not being funny, if that happened, I cannot see it. I cannot see it being supported by the international community, especially with places like Russia and China. Imagine, Chagos Islands has to be given bindingly to Mauritius, a country that never owned these lands. Imagine what would happen with places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, lots of places in the Russian Federation. It would mean these Eastern colonial powers would then be under complete and utter scrutiny from the UN to give away a lot of their lands that have way more right to either be independent or given back to another country, especially Crimea, say, with Ukraine. But Starmer doesn't want to take that gamble because, oh, court said so, have to do it. It's just incredible.
And let me be clear. We had to act now because the base was under threat. The courts have already made decisions which undermine our position.
And your friend represented Mauritius, yes, I remember. He was doing that along with Russian diplomats, by the way, as well. Literal Russian diplomats were carrying out significant diplomatic legwork to ensure that Mauritius had support for its legal claim to the Chagos Islands. This is our enemies acting against us, and Keir Starmer effectively saying, oh, all right then, you've won the lawfare. Good game. It's literally like playing a game of chess, and the first time your king is in check, you think, oh, that's it, game over, I resign. That is all that has happened here, and it's humiliating. To think that Britain has no case against this, against a country that has never owned the Chagos Islands, is absolutely absurd. Completely absurd. I'd rather spend $100 million a year fighting that in the international court than giving it to Mauritius.
And if Mauritius took us to court again, which they certainly would have, the UK's long-standing legal view is that we would not have a realistic prospect of success.
Get better lawyers then. Again, I don't know anyone. I can't find a single journalist. I can't find a single KC on Twitter. I can't find anyone who agrees with that statement. Almost all legal views I see on this, almost all journalists I see talking to KCs and quoting them on this, is effectively, oh, it's a non-binding agreement and probably won't go anywhere. It was a court pact with our enemies. If it goes any further up, we'll have a bit more of a case, in fact. That's what I see much more than, oh, we wouldn't have any chance in court. That is absurd. Again, from what I can tell, just not true.
And would likely face provisional measures orders within a matter of weeks.
What exactly is going to happen if you ignore the UN? Russia's ignored the UN. It's not created World War III, has it? Every country's doing pretty much what it would do anyway without the UN. It doesn't do anything. It's a joke. It's been a joke forever. There were Simpsons episodes in the 90s making fun of the UN for not doing anything. It's a total joke.
Even if we choose to ignore judgments made against us, international organisations and other countries would act on them.
By doing what? It's an American base. Yeah, I'm really sure they're going to try and Pearl Harbor the damn thing. Honestly.
And that would undermine the operation of the base, causing us to lose this unique capability.
What's the UN managed to stop Russia from doing? Nothing. What's actually happened? All other countries have put sanctions on them and is sending aid to to Ukraine. Sorry, that's all that's happened. Hell, Israel keeps ignoring UN law. What happens? Nothing. What actually makes them change their mind? America saying stop it, otherwise you'll lose support. Where does power lie? It's not the UN. Stop pretending it is.
One example of this is the electromagnetic spectrum. Countries have the right to manage this spectrum as they wish within their borders and overseen in the International Telecommunication Union.
This is the only steelman and argument for this surrender that I have ever seen that even remotely has legs. The problem is its legs are still pretty crippled. Yes, the UN has a regulatory body that effectively dictates what countries can and can't do with the electromagnetic spectrum, so radio waves and things like that. And, well, this is what Starmer has to say if we ignored the UN.
If our right to control it is put into doubt, we would lose the first line of defence against other countries who wish to interfere and disrupt this capability, rendering it practically useless.
Yeah, the thing is that the International Telecommunications Union, it doesn't engage into territorial disputes. That's outside of its legislation. That's not what it has any sort of jurisdiction over. And also, yeah, they're not going to act against a major US base that is incredibly strategically located. They're not going to do that. Because, effectively, it would mean that the ITU loses support of the US, which is basically the only thing that gives it legitimacy. And in fact, this specific point was already put forward in the House of Commons back in February by Marc Francois, asking the Secretary for State for Science, Innovation and Technology whether the International Telecommunications Union has ever challenged the use of civilian spectrum by the UK or US. And in the last paragraph, Chris Byron admits that the ITU can't actually challenge the UK's use of civilian or military spectrum. It's possible that one country could challenge another spectrum use, for instance, if it should cause harmful interference across borders, and if unresolved, they could bilaterally seek arbitration through an ITU body. In other words, the only way it comes under doubt is if Mauritius can make any sort of case that their borders are being infringed upon by any use of our electromagnetic spectrum. Given we're 3,000 miles away in the Chagos Islands, not gonna happen. This one point that I saw and I thought, oh, maybe there's a point here. No point whatsoever. As admitted by Labour's own ministers. I have come to the conclusion that there is no reason to do this whatsoever apart from Starmer's complete and utter ridiculous obsession with loving Davos, loving the international community, loving international law more than Britain's own interests and sovereignty. He has to get out of number 10 as soon as possible, obviously using our democratic processes. I am not advocating anything beyond that.
In addition, if we did not agree this deal, the legal situation would mean that we would not be able to prevent China or any other nation setting up their own bases on the outer islands.
What are you talking about, Starmer? They are our sovereign islands. We have control over them. If any other country tried to take any sort of land or set up their own bases on any other island in the archipelago, guess what we have the right to do, and the UN would have to agree with it? We could literally stop them, much like we stopped Argentina taking over the Falkland Islands. Are you crazy? In fact, not only that, if anything, this deal makes it more likely China can have bases on other islands in the archipelago, because we've ceded complete sovereignty of those other islands to Mauritius, which is an ally of China. If China says, can we put a base there, there's nothing actually stopping us from China putting a base there anymore. We actually had the right to stop them before, now we don't. And we paid for the privilege of losing that right. Total nonsense. I can't believe he's actually getting up to a podium to say this absolute claptrap of total and utter lies.
We would have to explain to you, the British people, and to our allies, that we'd lost control of this vital asset.
Well, if you don't fight to keep control of it, but why wouldn't you fight to keep control of it? I see why. It's because you believe in the international world order of international law within the UN. No fight whatsoever put up with this. You're basically having to tell us without telling us you have lost sovereignty over it. We're only leasing the damn thing, and it only lasts 100 years. Oh, you'll be dead, I suppose, so who cares? Incredible. This whole thing's just a slow-motion car crash.
Now, other approaches to secure the base have been tried over the years, and they have failed. Boris Johnson failed in his efforts to endlessly delay. Liz Truss then started the negotiations.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, Starmer. I am absolutely putting some of the blame on this onto the Tories for not dealing with the issue as and when they should have. They should never have even entertained going into talks about this, ever. Dominic Cummings, oddly enough, was one of the people saying, yeah, every time this came on my desk, I said, just say no. Just keep saying no. They can't actually do anything. And it turns out Liz Truss was a weak one on this, because who was her Home Secretary? Was it James Cleverly? Sorry, not Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, and it was James Cleverly. Yeah, he was the one who entered us into these negotiations. And, well, he's looking to be the next leader after Kemi Badenoch. It's not going to help this, is it?
We inherited a negotiation in which the principle of giving up UK sovereignty had already been conceded by the previous Tory government.
Oh, so are you implying that ceding sovereignty is bad then? Why would you go through with it then? Oh, because you believe in the sovereignty of international law, of course.
There's obviously a cost to maintaining such a valuable asset. We pay for other military bases. Allies like the US and France do the same.
Yeah, fine, but if there's an option to not cede territory and not have to pay for foreign bases, whereas instead we were renting the base to America, why do it? International law. It's the only reason. There's no other reason. Keir Starmer's friend represented Mauritius at the ICJ and won and humiliated us, his own words by the way, and was proud of that and came back to glory from other traitors in the UK. And effectively Keir Starmer said, oh, that was your work? Yeah, I'll go through with it. Oh, I'll pay as much as we need to for it. It'll be great. Occam's razor, that's the simplest explanation here. That's all that can have happened, because none of the other reasoning for this is making any sense.
And it will be less than the cost of running one aircraft carrier for a year.
No, what you've said there is that money could have gone to another aircraft carrier or other areas of defence. That's the other thing about this. This is coming out of the defence budget. No, I'm not having that. That is not good reasoning. Oh, this is less than one of the most expensive things the military can pay for. That's still ridiculous. What are you talking about? I'd rather have an aircraft carrier. Anyway, most of this nonsense I have effectively taken over from a Guido Fawkes article, but this press conference went on a little longer, but obviously Keir Starmer did not post the whole thing. So just to wrap up all these lies, in favour are all our allies, the US, NATO, Five Eyes, India. Against it, Russia, China, Iran, and surprisingly the leader of the opposition, Nigel Farage, are in that column alongside Russia, China, and Iran. Effectively trying to say, oh, Nigel Farage is against this, as are the Russians, isn't that bad? Anyway, Guido makes the point that actually a former Chinese Communist Party official, while serving as the ICJ's vice president, ruled that the UK must give the island to Mauritius as rapidly as possible. In other words, it's a lie. China are on the side of Mauritius. A Russian international judge and Putin ally also pushed for the handover of the islands, already went through that. China and Russia voted in favour of a 2019 UNGA motion calling for the decolonisation of Mauritius in accordance with the advisory opinion of the court, and a US judge was the only one to vote against the 2019 ICJ advisory ruling. So it's all nonsense. And in fact, on the Chinese point, I want to quickly go through. This comes directly from China's written statement on the ICJ ruling, which both China and Russia abstained from because effectively, if they actually did vote on this, they'd look like massive hypocrites, what with Taiwan and Ukraine and what have you. China states, when the General Assembly voted on the draft resolution that has now become a Resolution 71292, China abstained from the voting and made an explanatory statement reiterating China's firm support for the decolonisation process, and it understands the position of Mauritius on the question of decolonisation. The statement proceeded, recently the countries concerned made efforts through consultation and negotiation to seek solutions to the question concerning the Chagos archipelago. China notes that the aforementioned negotiations has not yielded progress. China calls upon the countries concerned to continue to make efforts in good faith to continue to carry out bilateral negotiations and consultation and to seek an appropriate solution to the question of Chagos archipelago as soon as possible. In other words, China are very firmly on the side of Mauritius and are in favour of decolonisation, but obviously only of Britain and America and other Western countries. In other words, I don't think Starmer could have told a worse lie, and yet here he is reiterating them. Anyway, there are other lies. Starmer asserted that international legal proceedings would have rendered the base inoperable. There's no evidence whatsoever for this assertion. And finally, what's the net cost? It's 3.4 billion, obviously over time with inflation, then that is the net cost. Well, actually, it's a lot closer to 30.3 billion, and I'll go into the details a bit more later. So it's £165 million a year for the first 3 years, plus 120 million a year for the next 10 years, then 120 million with assuming a 2% average inflation for the remainder, which, given this Labour government so far, it's not staying there. £45 million per year development fund for 25 years is also added on top of that, and £40 million one-off payment for a fund for Chagosians. So no, the average cost is not £3.4 billion, or the estimated cost, it's 10 times more than that almost. You cannot trust Starmer. He does not tell the truth. That's like most politicians. Yeah, sure, but this is even more egregious. He's saying things with either absolutely no evidence or written and easy to find evidence against all of this nonsense. Again, the only reason the Americans were on side with this is because effectively it went from them paying for the base to us paying for the base. They get to save money for their own base. Of course they take the deal. Sovereignty's under threat. Guess what? America will just take it back. They have the power. So, according to Express journalist Christian Calgi, it was a complete mess of a briefing in number 10, in which we experienced the government machine at its evasive, non-answering best, with refusal to acknowledge the cash cost of the Chagos is billions more than they're spinning, literally 30 billion more, though there's no denial that the number that journalists were giving to them, the 30 billion number, was inaccurate or incorrect. Confirmation the spending is going to be counted towards our total defence spending. So this is coming out of the defence budget. They're massaging numbers effectively to try and get to that 2 to 3%, whatever it was, of GDP being spent on, defence. It's not being spent on useful things. It's being spent to cede our own territory where we already have bases to then rent it off the country we just gave the islands to. It's crazy. No answers on to why America isn't paying towards the cost of the treaty, given their share of the key base that we no longer own. The US will pay for the upkeep of the base, but not towards the 13 billion plus cost of the treaty. So of course Trump supported it, and that's exactly what I was saying. America are on board with it because they effectively get a free base now. They'll pay for their side of the upkeep, and that's it, rather than the rent on top, which we used to get money for. No answer on whether any of the international law being cited as the reason for the deal has any base in UK law. Well, it would under Starmer, wouldn't it? So pointless question if you ask me. And no answer on to why the phrase decolonisation appears in the treaty. Why are we paying hundreds of millions to Mauritius, not Chagosian, no Diego Garcia development? And it's because, Mauritius has taken us to the cleaners. There's no defence for this. I'm seeing left-wing journalists not being able to defend this. The only person defending it is Dan Hodges. And his defence is effectively, the Tories thought there needed to be a deal done. Yeah, they were insane as well. You think the Americans were insane as well. It's not exactly a great defence here. I've never seen an issue that so much converges both the left and right to say, wow, this looks incredibly dodgy and incredibly stupid, Why aren't you answering any of our questions? That is how bad this is. There is nearly no left-winger defending this, aside from government ministers trying to up their career within the Labour Party and the odd contrarian left-wing journalist. That's it. There's nobody defending this. It's crazy. I mean, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, also tried to do his best to write a Times article effectively defending the deal, because of course he would, because he believes purely in decolonisation. That's the only reason he cares about this. And he tries to make the claim that even if Britain refused to comply with international ruling, our allies and partners would. No evidence whatsoever to assert this. I highly doubt the US would comply with losing access to their own base. Our land, air and sea operations would have been compromised. We would have been unable to safely berth nuclear-powered submarines, patrol the surrounding waters, or prevent hostile nations from setting up installations or conducting joint military exercises near the base. Again, total nonsense. You have a military base there. You can literally stop them. We finalised this agreement not out of deference to international law, but because Britain's national security demanded it. And an unshakable commitment to protecting our national security is the foundation for our plan for change, and unlike the Tories, we secured watertight safeguards, that you've ended up having to cut the winter fuel allowance for. Oh, we're getting it back now. Where have you found the money for that? Oh, well, we borrowed 20 billion and that didn't seem to cause too much of an issue, so we'll just borrow more. We're cooked as a country, thanks Labour. These include Britain's full British control of the island and electromagnetic spectrum. We've been through that nonsense. There's never been a time where the ITU has ever got in to a legal argument about civilian or military electromagnetic spectrum usage. A 24 nautical mile buffer zone where nothing can be built without UK consent. We already had that again. A veto over activities across the wider archipelago from disrupting base operations. We already had control of that. And a categorical ban on any foreign military or security presence on the outer islands. We already had that. They're our sovereign territory. We went through this 40 years ago with the Falklands. And as I say, nobody's buying it. All the top comments effectively say the same thing. Well put by Andrew Paul here, utter nonsense. NH Baker, it is absolutely beyond reason that this government has not only signed the worst deal in history, but is now attempting to gaslight the British people into believing that the yearly loss of over £100 million of their money for the next century is somehow in their interest. Complete and utter scandal. Nobody's buying any of this. This is nothing but damaging to Labour. Again, best defence we have of the Tories is effectively they were just starting negotiations to try and effectively shut the international community up. Doesn't mean you have to agree with anything, but no. We set up that... Sorry, we. The Tory... Well, I guess I was a Tory at the time. The Tories set up a ball to then be kicked by Labour straight into the back of our own net. It's horrendous. I will give the Tories some lenience, fine, but when you knew that the Labour government was coming in, you absolutely should have done everything you could to stop negotiations from being able to happen as much as you could. But no, you let it fly because you're full of lazy MPs who are just NPCs and do whatever the civil service tell you. The civil service wanted this as well because, again, I know people in the civil service, an awful lot of them, they're defending this as well, effectively because they've worked on it and it's largely up to their decision, so of course they're defending it. We are run by people who hate the country. We need to vote them out. It's the only thing to do. Reform is our best chance to do that. Vote for them. Anyway, the overall cost of all this is thankfully put on Twitter by the Telegraph's associate political editor, Tony Diver, who has estimated the cost at about 30 billion. So the rent is £165 million a year for the first 3 years, going down to about 120 million for years 4 to 13, and then inflation is added onto that for years 14 onwards. So I don't know why the claim is it's £101 million, the total cost of this. That is the propaganda number. And the old propaganda number was about 90 million a year. And it's no wonder that Mauritius was saying, oh, this is giving us double the 9 billion they were estimating. Well, it turns out it's actually nearly over, 3 times that amount. Plus, wait, there's more. There is a 45 million a year cost for a 25-year development plan with Mauritius. Just incredible. And then £40 million one-off for the Chagos Fund. Again, that's the least offensive part of all this, I'd argue. But it's still pretty damn offensive. And assuming a 2% inflation, which there's no way we're keeping to, a total cost is about £30.3 billion. But obviously the propaganda number from the government at the moment is £3.4 billion, which again is 3 times less than the old propaganda number and is nearly 10 times less than the actual number we have now. And luckily Tony Diver goes into their calculations. So according to the government, the total expected cost has been calculated by discounting the sums due to be paid to Mauritius over the duration of the treaty using the standard social time preference rate as set out in the Treasury's Green Book. I couldn't even tell you what that means. The public sector discount rate adjusts for social time preference, defined as the value society attaches to present as opposed to future consumption, and has been used in the UK since 2003, so it's Blair nonsense. It is a Blair way of excusing costs, effectively. The social time preference rate, I think effectively what that is saying, oh, we take money off from return on investment from social capital. I think that's what they're trying to say here. So 27 billion is taken off because it makes society feel good. That's about as good an argument as you're going to get from me, because I have no time to steel man this. Due to the long-term nature of the treaty, the discount rate has a significant impact on the expected cost. We have applied the declining long-term real STPR as follows: 3.5% for the first 30 years, 3% for years 31 to 75, and then 2.5% for the remaining 24 years or so. The average annual cost has been calculated by applying the Office for Budget Responsibility forecast GDP deflator to future payments described above. Oh, so they're relying on the OBR that gets everything wrong too. In other words, you can't trust the number whatsoever. Total nonsense. This is the type of total nonsense and fudging of numbers that will absolutely be got rid of by reform if they got in, because they're businessmen. They do not at all want anything like this. They want real return on investment. How much is this actually going to save the British people? Are we actually going to be able to afford this? Is borrowing going to be worth it in the end? Will we be able to pay off the interest, etc, etc, etc? With this calculation, it's just, oh, it only costs 3.4 billion, that's fine. Plus, we're actually doing it to secure our own national security interests that we definitely couldn't have had otherwise. I cannot get over how ridiculous and absolutely asinine this government is for actually going through with it and strongly trying to use our own tax money that they have taken off us to give to foreign countries to rinse us and take us to the cleaners. It's ridiculous. The Nick 30 meme is going to have yet another arrow pointing directly to the government of Mauritius, all because our government is absolutely asinine and does not want to defend our own interests, which we already knew, but it's ridiculous it's got to this level. Anyway, I think I'd better end this video before it just turns into me ranting about how terrible the Labour government is. If you want to see that, look at literally any of my streams. But for now, I think I'll try and keep this video under an hour. Right, so with that, if you enjoy my work, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and do, of course, become a channel member if you can afford it, or perhaps super chat or super thanks any of my videos. It's a great way to help out the channel, and I appreciate absolutely everyone who donates. As for streams, next Tuesday it's Tosh Talks, the poll is going up on the Worcester Club. Next Thursday it's more Subnautica, we've managed to get quite a way into that yesterday or last night, and then just be laughing at the Guardian with some whamming. So do look forward to that. Right, that's everything I had for you for today. I'm so sorry it had to be a log-sized black pill for the weekend, but well, you know, I had to eat a lot of humble pie after posting the video yesterday, and within an hour having to post an update that actually we can't have nice things. The only way you can have nice things is voting reform. That's the lesson here, right? Once again, everyone, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.